Okay, future Nick here. I recorded most of this video a week and a half ago. I just wanted to make a quick disclaimer about this video. I'm not going to cut anything that I've already edited out, but throughout the video you're going to see me misnaming parts and complaining that I can't finish the project. Fingers crossed today we'll get it all resolved. But yeah, this has been a couple of months work, and so I've decided just to throw it all into one big video. We're going to crack on with it and see how we get on. Run the credits. So stock is on the right, Yuminashi is on the left. Now, I was concerned about the placement of this bracket. As we can see, it's more upright, but I may be able just to reuse this bracket anyway, seeing as I'm swapping other things around. I would like to keep the placement of everything as close as possible. So let's have a look at them from this side. Yeah, it all looks pretty much hunky-dory from there. Okay, here's where we might run into a hassle because the sensor unit might be facing the wrong way there. So let's turn it around. Yeah, I think the only key difference I can see is the placement of the injector solenoid bracket, which may not be a big issue by itself, but we'll see how it goes together. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to apologise about the creaks and the wobbliness. My table is not the best. So here is the stock throttle body. Here is the Yuminashi. I don't know what you want to call it. So we are going to try and match this manifold to this diameter. So look side by side. Visible difference, right? I put these bolts in just to placeholder them, but I'm just going to wind them in so I can have a better visual like they sit in the throttle body. So this is how throttle body, so pretend you're the engine, right? Clip. It's actually that way. All right. So now we get the Yuminashi. Now, primary measurement on the bike was a bit hard to get to. I said 65 mil, and that's not quite matching. So what we will do, I'm going to remind you that this is a prototype. It's never been made before. So this is as much as fault diagnosis as anything else. These can be refined once I take some accurate measurements. So we're going to measure the bolt spacing. Okay, center line. I've got this locked off at 64. Center line to center line. 64 mil. Because of course it's a millimeter smaller. I'll tell you what, that's literally a millimeter. Let me undo that. Okay, I've locked that off at 65 mil. 65 and a half. So there is a little bit of a difference between the spacings, but these aren't threaded, and I might just run these holes 1/2 mil bigger with my drill, because the first thing I wanted to make sure before I went modifying anything is that these bolts match. So long as I get this central, it should be fine. All right, so I don't know how well this will show. I'll use my pointer here. The gasket is quite visible on the outside, but as far as I can tell, it's still creating an actual seal on the inside. I think lining up these holes is going to be an absolute pain, but I do genuinely think we're going to get away with it. I tell you what, that is so close. These holes need to be 1/2 mil closer together. All right, I'm going to make an executive decision here because I know that's not fitting well enough. I'm going to go ahead and drill out these holes maybe 1/2 mil wider. Now, sure, there'll be a bit of a slop in the bolt, but so long as it meets the threads on the manifold, it should be fine. Ideally, I'd tape that off, but I'm just going to shove some paper towel in there. So I'm going to use my 6.5 mil drill bit. Oh, look, that's 6.5 anyway, so what I might just try and do, I'm going to go ahead and remove this bracket. All right, we'll pop that to the side for now. That just gives me a little bit of more room to work with. Now, let's put 6.5 away and we'll get out 7 mil. These holes look nice and neat now. I've just made them 1/2 mil bigger. I'm just going to carefully thread that in. I reckon that's a tight squeeze. I'm going to make an executive decision and just widen these holes out because I should not have to force anything and I don't want to damage any threads in the doing so. Whenever you're enlarging holes, make sure you do things incrementally. Now, I really am taking my time with these to try and make sure I get them as close as possible. Now, they were 6.5 mil to begin with. My calipers might have been out by 0.2, not a big deal. So we went up to 7 mil. So now we're going up to 7.5. I'm going to have my work cut out for me cleaning this thing when I'm done. I am going to have to go through this throttle body so carefully to make sure that there's no aluminium bits in there. So we have widened these holes by 1 millimeter, 1/2 mil at a time. Because my cursory measurement was off. So back to square one, trying to fit these in. So these are now 7.5 mil. Because, just to reiterate, I took this measurement off the bike at 65 mil. It's actually 64.5 mil. Why they did that, I don't know. So I had to make the edges of these holes a mil closer to center. You know, 1/2 mil each side. Just remember, especially when you're test fitting aluminium, it should be nice and easy to thread in, because if you're forcing it, you're probably cross-threading it. So these are just finger tight, these two bolts here, but it is fitting. What we can see is the gasket sitting out ever so slightly along this edge and ever so slightly along that edge. but I do genuinely think that's going to seal. And if it doesn't, then we'll just put some 3-bond in there to seal it up. I should be able to get away without using 3-bond for this. But that is essentially what we're looking at. Here is our stock throttle body. I'll try and give you a proper look. I think, looking at this, the brackets for these cables, what did I do with the other one over here? I wasn't too happy with the placement of this bracket. It is a slightly different profile. So what I'm going to do first is take this bracket off of the stock throttle body and put it back on there, because I just want everything following the same routing as close as possible. Alright, so looking at the two brackets here and here, they're identical, right? Interestingly enough, here's my JB weld that I put on after I tried grinding away that throttle stop. Because the ECU knew that the throttle was opening up more than it should. I'm going to take this manifold off, because now that I know that it fits, I can just keep it out of the way. Alright, now we're just going to go and put these bolts back in here for safekeeping. I do this whenever I can. It's easier to keep track of which bolts go where if you put them back in the threads that they came from. The brackets for the throttle cables are in a slightly different position than on the Yuminashi, but I'm pretty sure there's plenty of slack I can adjust out of those cables to make that work. So I'm not too worried about that. That is just one of the differences that I've noticed. So first of all, I'm going to take off this is the fuel injector plug. Okay, this is all going to be very difficult to undo, so forgive me if I stab myself and swear. Break the thread. Okay. Behind here is this little bad boy. Oops, there's a lot coming out there. So we're just going to sit that back in there together, try and make sure that nothing else comes out. Big old O-ring. Now, guess what? These are different. Alright, so I've got my gasket in there, and this is what it looks like. This is the difference. This is not going to go together. So we've hit a snag on our first sensor. Alright. Unfortunately, that means that's the end of my install, because I cannot make that fuel injector fit. So I'm going to have to go ahead and try and source one of these plugs back to the drawing board. Alright, just in the interest of keeping everything together, I'm going to go ahead and put this unit back on the stock one. But this is what it means building a prototype. Alright, let's get into this sensor unit and see if we can at least get that to fit here. I may have to do a throttle position sensor reset after this, but we'll just see how we go. Alright, so I have not tightened those up completely yet, but that has just fit on beautifully. What we of course need to do now with this manifold is to match this hole to that diameter, otherwise the engine's just choking. Now I've already measured this, it's 30 mil. Now we've got the manifold here, which, as I just said, we want to port match. Take a diameter, pretty much 24 on the dot. And on the back side, now this is interesting, this is really narrow. That's 20 mil, oh no, that's upside down there, isn't it? 20 mil. So can we see through there? There is a slight angle through there. So the aim of the game here, of course, is to widen that and widen that. Why it narrows down so much, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to give that my best go. It's not my first rodeo doing port work. I used to do my own port work on my two-strokes, my motorised bikes. I'm probably not going to have much luck in there. Maybe once I wear this down a bit, I can start to spread that open.
Five minutes later.
So I've been working away with my drill. I really don't think I can do any more than what I've done. I haven't made a massive difference. This has been chamfered out. It's quite hot to touch actually, so bear with me. You can see the pattern that I've shaved into that. So it has opened out quite a bit, and I've opened that passage up. I seem to have reduced that curve in the inside, which was quite restrictive. So you can see the mess that I've made on my towel here. So not for nothing, we've been working. So you can see where I've widened it the most. I was a little bit concerned about the fuel injector port there. I don't think I can take much more of that without really damaging it. I don't want to be putting any pinholes in the casting. There's a good angle there. You can actually see the casting join through there. So I don't really want to take any more off of this, but I'm curious if that will make much of a difference. So this opening is now about 27 mil. So I've taken about 2 mil out of it, which is still pretty significant. It's not going to match the 30 mil. And on the small side, that's now, what was it? I measured 20. That's now reading 25. I know that's upside down. So not for nothing, I have opened it up, so hopefully that does make a big, enough of a difference. Yeah, I'm just not comfortable taking any more out of that. But if someone were to say cast an aftermarket one that was port matching, you've got 5.5 mil in the wall, 8 mil on this side. So I think you could absolutely design a big bore manifold, because I feel like now that's going to be the choking point of this whole project. I'm of a split mind whether or not I want to put the bike back together and just see what difference doing this made, if any. I could put that 140cc injector in and see how we go, but I think for the time being I'll leave the bike in parts and just see how I get on finding that injector plug that's going to fit. I think that's going to be my best bet, is just trying to find a plug that will fit onto that throttle body. I'll see how I go with that before putting the stock throttle body back together. So yeah, I'll leave the bike in pieces for now. It's not like I need it. Yeah, a little anticlimactic. I wanted to go out for a ride, but we shall just have to see how we go from here. This is a prototype. This is just some of the stuff we have to figure out. Yeah, the worst part is waiting for spare parts. Maybe I can find a second-hand one. I'll have to go and do my homework. I was just reminded of something else I wanted to check. So I do want to use this stock intake. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you knew the very first thing I really did was to cut out that spark arrestor screen, and that did improve airflow quite a bit. What I needed to see, so that is 39.5 mil, and this is quite a bit smaller actually, surprisingly enough. Interestingly, not where I was expecting this to go anyway. At its widest point, it is 39.5 mil, and this one at its widest point is 36 mil. So I was imagining this not being wide enough. It's actually too wide. I think I'll be able to mock something up. I'll make an O-ring or something like that out of some something. Yeah, there is a significant amount of flop in there. So this should really be at least matching that for ease of use. At any rate, it is interesting that the stock one is wider, even though the intake there is substantially narrower. Yeah, I've got to go figure out some part numbers and see what I can get my hands on for that.
1 week later.
So my solution to getting this 36mm diameter throttle intake to fit this 39 diameter intake tube was to just cut up this old scooter inner tube and just put 2 layers of it around the ring. Now that should still seal up. We do have a ring clamp on there still, but just giving that a gentle squeeze. 39.9 is 39 there too also. The thing is that even if I want to replace that tube, that's why I pulled it out of the airbox, I still would have had to do this anyway, because I can't get my hands on 36mm silicone hose, but I can get my hands on 38mm radiator hose, which is what I'm going to end up going with, seeing on what I can get my hands on. I will probably have to widen that hole out to make a new hose fit, but for the time being, I want to make sure that the stock airbox pipe fits, and if I can get a tube that I can cut down to match the size, I'll modify that to fit. This is what I needed to do before this even goes on the bike. That is a nice snug fit, and I'm not worried about any air leaks through that hose. I mean, it's rubber hose for crying out loud. So obviously there's still a few things I need to take care of before I can put this on the bike, but this was a step that was bugging me.
1 week later.
Alright, so it's been about a week and a half since I left off. The bike's still in pieces. The problem I had was that this sensor, this is a solenoid. I kept on calling it wrong in this video. I kept on naming it the fuel injector plug, and that's just because that little plug's basically identical to it, so it's whatever. Anyway, this is the idle control valve solenoid. As you saw, they weren't fitting, so I contacted Yuminashi and they've sent me out one of their manual idle control valves. It does the same thing, except this should give us basically a little bit more control over the air fuel mixture without the ECU sending the solenoid open and closed. So we may get an engine code, running this, because obviously there's nothing to plug into. But the idea is just to plug this back in, zip tie it up out of the way, and the bike shouldn't know any difference. Right, so one of the problems I noticed, obviously, was that there are 2 screws coming out, but I need 3 screws to go in. So I had to go digging through my mess trying to find a matching thread, and I think I have. Make sure our gasket's installed. Alright, so we're going to need to reuse these screws. Now, we're not going to throw this away because, like I said, if I get an engine code, I might just plug that in just to be on the safe side. I'm trying not to fiddle with this too much. I'm going to leave it as it is. It does have a little locking nut there. Basically, if and when the bike starts, I'll be able to adjust the idle to within spec, and then I'll lock this off, and that should hopefully keep it there. So we're going to line this up, drop our little solenoid valve down in there. And of course, it doesn't fit. I'm not really sure how I'm going to go about making this fit, but I know that there has to be something in there. Well, actually, I'm not so sure. I've never seen a manual idle control valve before. So I'm going to assume that we don't actually need this spring, this valve. I'm going to go ahead and install this just as it is. I'm going to say again that this is an entirely experimental throttle body. This hasn't been made before for this model of bike. So there is a little bit of fault diagnosis and figuring it out, but I'm pretty good at solving that kind of issue. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and install it without any valve in there. If it turns out I do need this spring, this is just plastic. I guess that I could widen that. But I won't do anything to this until we figure out whether or not the bike's actually going to run. So it might be against better judgment, but I am going to go ahead and just install it like that. Okay, the two screws that I have are going to go in here, and then my third one off to the side is going to go in there. So it's lucky that I have a lot of odds and ends lying around, and I even found, this is one of my old two-stroke carburetors from the motorized bikes. There's definitely some usable bolts, but the only reason I bought this inside is I also need a washer to fit, but I'm going to see if I can't pull one of these washers from behind the screen here. Judging by the mud on this, I would say this came off the Mark III motorized bike, which saw a few iterations in its time. Whilst I could absolutely use that, it's the right thread. Boop. It's A, filthy, and also way too long. What I wanted was that little spring washer off the back. Alright, so that's what we've got. Get that filthy old carburetor out of the way. And that washer fits beautifully in the little recess there. So, ugh. So that's going to do the job nicely. I'm going to tighten all these down now. Make sure that that gasket is nice and seated. I'll just double check these. I'm sure that I did these up tight, but yeah, that's pretty snug. That is pretty much ready to go on the bike now. Pretty happy with that. That should be nice and easy to access. On the stock throttle body, you could still manually adjust the idle using this little adjusting screw here. So I've been calling this a 30mm in all my posts. It's 30mm here. The actual opening into the engine block is 28mm. Now I've got my breather hose that I pulled off. It's only going to go on one way, which is this way. So this is my 120cc injector. Now when I installed this, I felt the need to put this outer ring gasket because I didn't feel like it was seating inside the fuel injector mount properly. So I went ahead and pulled it off the bike. It was an absolute pain in the bum to get this out. So if you don't have to do it, don't. But basically I thought it would be easier to show how it sits. Did I just put that in upside down? Put it in the right way, idiot. So it goes in, and you can feel it click. And it just pulls straight back out again. Here is our 140cc Yuminashi fuel injector. This is the stock gasket that I pulled off the 90cc injector to make it work. Alright, so basically, when you just try and put it in, yeah, it's loose. It's not going to work. You don't need to replace rubber grommets every single time. Alright, so we're just going to take the O-ring off the stock injector, and we're just going to place it so it's sitting on top of this existing one. Alright, so just for clarification, you need a 12mm outer diameter O-ring to make this work. The ones that came on the injectors, they're 2mm smaller, they're 10mm. So this is the configuration that I used with the 120cc, and I never skipped a beat with it, never had any issues. As far as this bottom one goes, it just sits in this recess here, and it seals, it just does. We're going to mount the fuel injector in just with the bottom threaded hole there, because again, it's going to be much easier to do it here than it will be to do it back on the bike. At any rate, just having this second short bolt in there will just help locate that while I tighten it. That's all I wanted to do, was I wanted to get that ready to plug in. then the only bolts I have to do up will be the actual engine block mounting bolts. So in all this back and forth with Yuminashi, I've collected quite a number of these stickers. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you might know that I hate stickers. And one of the very first things I did to this Honda when I took delivery of it was to debadge it all. Run the clip. So let's get rid of this.
Now, that's how people know it's a Honda.
So if everything I do works out, I'm going to put these stickers on the bike as a badge of honour. So before this complicated looking contraption goes back on the bike, I need to go out and try and find a tube that can fit. So I'm going to go grab my intake pipe and I'm going to go to the auto stores and try and find a pipe with the right diameter with a similar sort of bend in it. And we'll go from there. All right. So I'm back. I managed the closest match I could get was some radiator hose. It just so happens that the pipe that I found was the best fit came from a 1976 Ford Fairlane V8. And I think that is pretty bloody cool. So the process here is pretty simple. What we're going to do is we're going to mark out the best match on here. So obviously we only need sort of this section here. I'm going to remove that. That was just the resonator, which actually all it does is reduce the drone a little bit. It's not a remotely necessary part of the intake pipe. There's a great deal amount of eyeballing going on here. So with a healthy amount of eyeballing, a little bit of overhang on each side is probably better than not. We're going to try and keep this line as effing straight as possible. Alright, so there's our two marks. So my radiator hose is now in two pieces. Of course, the stock intake tube only has an internal diameter of about 26 mil. A little bit of Vaseline. Some around there. Some around there. Okay, so that comes out roughly on that angle actually, doesn't it? And just like that, in it goes. That is a pretty tight fit. That will of course clamp down even more when I do that up. But that's all she wrote. So now we have a nice, great big opening down here instead of this rubbish, whatever that is. So now that that's done, we have one more job to do, and that is to make this hose fit the airbox, which means I currently have a 37 mil opening there, and this probably about 10 mil bigger. There is this profile here. That is almost exactly the size that I need to whiz it out to. So one of the best tricks you can do with any rubber fitting is to drop it in a bit of boiling water. It helps make the rubber malleable and easy to get in. So I've absolutely made a bloody mess of that, but I reckon it's close enough to jam that in. We just have run-of-the-mill silicone RTV that we're going to run around the edges to seal up any gaps. So I'm going to just let that soak and do my best to jam that in and then get that bend on as close an angle as I can to what the stock one was. That's pretty good, I reckon. And so far as I can tell, that's about as close of an angle as the stock one was. Maybe rotate it up like that a little bit. I reckon I can make that work. If we, of course, look at where the stock one sits, I reckon that's pretty close actually. Because it is a bigger pipe, I have got the convenience of being able to slide it further in, which is exactly what I'm going to do. We've got to try and get this as close as possible to the stock dimensions. I would say, well, you can see pretty well there, that is pretty bloody close. I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave it. I think we need just a slightly bigger nozzle. There we go. Getting in through the top here is going to be a little bit difficult because there's barely enough room for a screwdriver, much less anything else. So I think I might just have to poke it down and hope. I need to go ahead and make the rest of the bead look that nice. So I'm going to stop this so I don't get my camera gross, and I'll check back in once it's set. Alright, so I'm racing daylight at the moment, but everything's back together to the point where I can put fuel back in the tank and check for leaks. My only concern is that, hopefully you've been able to see from the pictures, but I can't really get to that manual IAC valve. So I'm going to have to practice. It is that flash of red that you see up there. Now, I can barely get my fingers in there, and I've got no idea what it is actually set at. I think my best bet might be coming in from the other side still. Yeah, I can't show you. Oh, there it is. Can you see? Boop. It's blurry, but that flash of red and my fingertips is the idle control valve. And I've got no idea what it's set at. So we're going to prime the bike, check for leaks, and hope that it doesn't just rev the shit out of itself. Now we're just about ready to prime, and every time you take the fuel out, you've got to prime it at least 3 times. Okay, let's go. All right, primed. All right. Here goes nothing. But so far, so good. We're at idle. Now before it gets too hot in here, right, that idle's a little bit high now. Alright, I'll probably need 2 hands. I need to try and wind that in again. It's really hard to reach that idle control valve, but it is idling. I had a few more bits and pieces to put together on the bike before I completely run out of daylight, but I want to try and get that idle sorted out before I do anything else. Alright, I'm running out of daylight. I literally can't get in there to adjust the valve, so I'm going to have to try and figure something out. I am out of daylight, so I've really got to put it away. The idle's doing something a little bit funny. I think it's like right on the fine tune. Problem is, this gets hot really quickly. I think my only real solution is going to be taking the whole throttle body out and adjusting the thing a few turns, putting it back together, rinse and repeat. But it's darker than it looks here. I'm completely out of light. So I'm going to put the bike away like that, happy at least that it runs. It's probably going to run a bit shit like that until the ECU's relearned. You know, because it's only ran for about 2 minutes. It's probably trying to figure out how to idle again. So I might just leave it running like that while I pack up my tools. And if it happens to smooth out, then I'll let you know. If not, then I'll see you tomorrow while it's light.